everybody. We're about ready to begin the second general session of the Oxford House Annual Convention. Pass the word for folks to head this direction. I think you can probably dim these lights a little bit also. They're still a little bright. One of the things that many folks in Oxford House bring with them when they come into an Oxford House is the distinction of having done time in prison or jail. When I look out over the crowd here, how many of you have done some jail or prison time? Well, still a pretty good number, even after lunch. I think if we had filled up the room, we would have an awful lot of hands, too. Every year when we do a study and a profile of the folks living in Oxford House, we come up with about 76% of Oxford House residents having served an average of 13 months in either federal or state prisons or jails. I understand there's a difference, but we're going to talk today a bit about the fact that for those who end up in prison, getting out may be the most dangerous point in their lives, because going home to where you came from doesn't help you very much if you're a drug addict or an alcoholic. Time after time, I hear stories of folks going home to the old neighborhood, and the only guy that comes out to meet them is their own old drug dealer. He welcomes them home. And often will give free samples for a while. And after a while, he says, you know I'm in business. You're either going to have to help and work for me, or you're going to have to figure out a way to get some money, because I can't afford to keep giving you this stuff. And so you do that, you're back in trouble, and you're back in jail, or you're back in prison. Sometimes, quite by accident, folks figure out that there is a better way. In Texas, for example, a few folks getting out of prison went to Oxford House. A few folks getting out in the kind of the same situation went back to where they came from. Those that went back to where they came from ended back up in jail or prison in just 3 months. Those who ended up into Oxford House felt lucky, because 27 months later, none of them had gone back to prison. Word of that begins to spread. It begins to spread among corrections officers. It begins to spread among law enforcement folks. It begins to spread in 12-step meetings. It begins to spread all around the community that maybe this Oxford House thing is something that has value. Maybe this Oxford House thing is a place to go where you can put your life back together and not keep cycling in and out of those prison systems, those jails, or sometimes a side trip to the nut house. And for those places that have that kind of inspiration, Oxford houses blossom, and folks get into recovery and stay in recovery. This panel is going to look at specifically this whole business of recovery and reentry from incarceration. And the reason we're looking at it is it's a reality. And I think you'll learn this afternoon that over 2 million folks are incarcerated in this country. About 2.2 million is a figure it's thrown around most often. That's an awful lot of people. A lot of those people who are incarcerated have booze and drug problems, which means that when they get out, they'll carry with them the booze and the drug problem, and again, their judgment will be impaired, and again, they'll be back in prison. We have two experts with us today from very different sides of the coin, David Patton is the chief prosecutor, chief attorney for the Federal Defenders of New York.
Correct that right away.
What is it? Oh, sorry. He's on our side, not there. Sorry about that. I was looking at his father out there, and his father was giving me a hard time about not having him on the panel, and I told his father he was too old, and I was thinking to myself, I'm older than Tom. Maybe I'm starting to lose it a little. Well, I lost it. David Patton is a defender, and has about 50 or 60 lawyers under him that also defend folks who get into trouble and need a lawyer, and they get into trouble by committing some federal crime. And I'm going to turn this meeting over to David and let him moderate it and tell a bit about what he's done, and introduce Ryan King, who's going to tell us the facts and figures when I throw out that 2.2 million, maybe close, but he knows how close stuff is, and how many folks are really in prison and how many probably have problems. The rest of the panel up here are folks who have been successful in Oxford House. They also are folks who had good, solid, long-term imprisonment in our prison system. Steve wants to know what my definition is of long-term. He only had 2 years. But these guys brought with them the knowledge of both the inside and the outside, and we think that over this general session, we can learn how to carry to those in charge of society ideas for improving what we have today. There is no need to cycle in and out of prison. There is a need for more Oxford houses leading to long-term recovery. With that, let me turn this session over to David Patton, defender of those accused of crime.
I've been called a lot of lousy things in my life. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a hell of a group. I can't tell you how special it is for me to be joining you here today. Paul just mentioned that my dad is here, and he is. He's sitting there in the front row. Wave to the folks, Dad. So Paul and Jane Malloy are my godparents. They went to law school with my dad. I don't know a lot about those times. I know they were pre-sobriety times. But here we are at a 40th anniversary celebration of Oxford House. I'm 45. Oxford House has always been a part of my consciousness. I kind of grew up with it. And this is just so special for me to be here and to have Paul and Jane ask me to do this. So, as Paul said, sort of, I head the Federal Defender Office in New York City. So we represent people charged with federal crimes who can't afford a lawyer. I don't know that there was a hand that did not go up in here when Paul asked how many have been in the criminal justice system. So, does anybody want to admit that they have not been to jail? I know that's a hard thing to admit. I am guessing that one or two of you who raised your hand might have had a public defender somewhere along the way. I have no doubt that for some of you that was not a good experience. Hopefully for some of you, at least the lawyer part of it, the public defender part of it, you got lucky and you got somebody who cared and worked hard and actually had the time and resources available to them in their office to do good work for you. I struggle to make sure that my office has those resources and cares an awful lot about our clients. That's my mission. That's been my career's passion, is this area. One of the very first hires I made, I've been head of the office now for 4 years, one of the very first hires, not one of the very first hire I made was a great social worker. And we've only added to that because we know, as everybody in here knows, that when people get wrapped up in the criminal justice system, it's so much more than just some specific incident. It's about a whole life, oftentimes, of trauma and addiction and other things. And that it's important to tackle those things if you're going to really tackle the criminal case. And so not only do we work on traditional reentry, that is working with our clients who are coming out so we don't have to worry about them handling supervised release or probation, but we actually front-end the reentry. We're saying to judges up front, this is what we can do if you show a little bit of humanity here. And here's a very specific plan rather than just sort of vague assurances. And we've seen how incredibly important that is and how judges have frankly responded to that. So that's sort of the office-specific mission that I have, but recently I've taken on more of an outward-looking policy view on things as well. I now chair the Federal Defender Legislative Committee, so we deal with Congress on pending legislation. You know, for most of time, being a public defender talking to lawmakers on the Hill is, you know, I don't know, you name it, like the anti-wine lobby in France or something. You know, we don't carry a lot of weight. You know, America has just been a very prison-happy place. We are at a point of real crisis, and we have been for quite some time. Ryan's going to talk in greater detail about that. I'm sure you've heard all of the various statistics. To me, the one that always jumps out that's so frightening is that we have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. For a country that loves to tout its love of freedom, we have a funny way of showing it. But for the first time in a long time, I have a little bit of optimism. And trust me, I'm not an optimistic person. In my line of work, it gets tough. But there is reason, I think, for some optimism. There is a public discussion, and it's bipartisan, and it's coming from Tea Party Republicans and liberal Democrats around tackling this and solving this crisis. And frankly, it's part of how I come here to you today. I ran into Paul at the Colson Commission hearings last spring. The Colson Commission is a commission put together by Congress. Ryan is on the staff of the hosting body, the Urban Institute, that's going to issue a report next year, hopefully with some very good recommendations about ways that we can start tackling this crisis. But from my experience with the Colson Commission, my experience on the Hill, speaking with lawmakers and staffers about what's going on and all the good things, it always comes back to one thing, which is it's not enough to say prison is not the answer. You've got to come forward with some sort of answer yourself. You've got to come forward to have any chance of really changing our current system, of saying, here are some answers to your legitimate concerns about public safety, about crime, about how do we really solve addiction and all sorts of other issues that permeate the criminal justice system. And obviously there is no one answer to all of those things. But one of the answers is surely Oxford House and the work that you people understand. This is it's part of why I'm so excited to be here. It's just so incredible. I'm going to shut up now because you didn't come to hear me talk. I'm very excited to hear what the folks up on this panel have to say. It's really an extraordinary group. We're going to start with Ryan, who's going to kind of give us the lay of the land and the policy perspective on things. Ryan is at the Urban Institute, just one of the truly best organizations out there for doing some really thoughtful work on all sorts of public policy issues. And then from Ryan, we're going to go to hear some real-world accounts and some experiences, both with incarceration and reentry, and what role Oxford House played in that, and what role you all can play when you go back to your homes and states to help be part of what I think is the beginning of a really incredible movement for the first time in a long time. So Ryan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to come here and speak at a really interesting time that David alluded to, and I just want to spend a couple of minutes to put a little bit of that in perspective about where we are now and how policy conversation has changed, and to put out a challenge to you all about how I think you all can contribute to that. I work with the Urban Institute now. I've been there for about a year and a half. I've been developing a portfolio of research and work around tackling mass incarceration. And what that looks like most specifically is providing technical assistance through data analysis and research and policy analysis to states and to the federal government that are looking for ways to try to address the growth in incarceration. That even exists, so that is even on the radar, is something that's really become in the last 5 years. And it's going on all across the country. It's encouraging. I worked before at Urban Institute. I worked for about 5 years with the Pew Charitable Trusts. We actually worked out in states that were looking to take on incarceration, that were looking to take on sentencing reform, that were looking to improve their reentry services. And I don't mean sort of your typical liberal states. We're talking about places we worked in like were Georgia, Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas. Hard, conservative, deep red states that had built a bipartisan desire to try to bring about some reforms, and they've been really encouraging. And all of that is really, really good, and it's building this sense of momentum. And many folks out there have heard about this evolving bipartisan consensus, and you've probably heard about folks all the way to the right, like the Koch brothers now, that are funneling money and interest into this and partnering with the American Civil Liberties Union to try to cut the prison population. It's a really remarkable time. And all of that, I think, is really good. What I want to put out there is a caution about that. And so this is my sense of the field right now. Is I think there is a bipartisan agreement. There's an agreement across the country in travels and conversations that I've had that mass incarceration as currently conceived is a problem. There are too many people in prison. The issue that I've raised, where I'm concerned about how far we're going to get and where I might be a little more pessimistic, and I'm a pessimistic person by nature, but where I may be a little more pessimistic, is I don't think we have a lot of widespread agreement about what the causes of mass incarceration are. And until we get that agreement on the causes, we're not going to get the types of solutions that we really need that are sustainable. And I think what we've seen now and what we've seen in the States have been important reforms, but ones that tend to be focused on strengthening community supervision, different types of potential earned time credits. But when we're out there and we're working in the States for a year or so, we are battling with folks in the legislature for 5 extra days earned time, for small modifications of sentence length, battling for months and months and months. And when you step back and think, if we're fighting over a week here or 2 weeks there to reduce sentences, even though we've got this mountain of evidence behind us about the fact that there are better alternatives out there, and I do want to pick up on that solutions piece in a moment, that there are alternatives out there. That gives you a sense of the battleground. We can get to the table now, which we couldn't do 5 or 10 years ago. I think that's what you were saying, right? You get laughed out of a room. I remember going to meetings up on the Hill where Judiciary Committee would have a hearing, and you'd bring folks in here, we'd talk about these issues. There'd be one of those, a few a session. I mean, now my inbox is full of events. There's events on the Hill every day, multiple events around this town. Every day people are talking about these issues. There's a lot of talk. And that's good, but it hasn't gotten us anywhere at this point. There's just a lot of talk. And what I think we need to do and come together is to build that pressure and to put that pressure forward. And you all here have a story to tell. We were talking a little bit about this before. I think it's critically important. The solutions piece. We are now sitting at a table. We're invited to come and sit at a table that legislators who traditionally would have been hostile in the past are now saying, all right, I agree there's a problem. What the heck are we going to do about it? And at that point, that's progress. What are our solutions? The rubber's hitting the road now with this stuff. And we're starting to talk about, there is a fundamental shift in thought about how we deal with drug offenses, for example. But the solutions, we don't have that agreement yet. And what that looks like and an understanding about what harm reduction looks like, what a real 21st century substance abuse policy should look like at the state and federal level. Not a criminal justice centered one, but more of a health harm reduction focused one. That sort of approach is not there yet. And the people that are at the table that we're having conversations have a fundamental misunderstanding about a lot of this. And what I think we need to do, and what you have stories do, your stories need to be conveyed to the people who are in positions of power to make decisions. And that's not happening right now. And I think the conversations that I have with folks, and I don't want to be the messenger. I can talk about data and I can talk about research, and most people's eyes glass over. One of you in a room with the right person telling their story will change more minds than I could with a mountain of data. And we see that all the time. We see that all the time. A good New York Times article can get a bill introduced in a state legislature where, I could toil for 5 years putting research out and I couldn't get somebody to return a phone call. So what I want to say is, if we're going to shift this conversation from problem identification to solutions, then we need you all to be there to get your conversations out, to get your stories out of success. Not just to the policymakers, but to the public as well, to understand that people can turn their lives around and do turn their lives around every single day in this country. Whether it's Oxford House or other ways, they turn around every single way. This idea in the 1970s used to be the saying, nothing works, and that has defined our correctional policy for 40 years. And it's still, even we may be in a better state now, we may still have this bipartisan kumbaya agreement about reform, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of people who think that nothing really works. And that's a failure from us, all of us collectively as a community that's pushing for reform. And we need to get that word out there are things that work, and get that out. Because I do think we have an opening. I don't know how wide the opening is, and whether people are coming to the table because they want to save money, or they're coming to the table because they're coming from a faith-based perspective, whatever it might be, I don't care. If you're going to let us sit down, we have a narrow opportunity window to get a story across. And we can put a little bit of data out there, but I want you guys all involved in this. You should take your success stories and leave a place like this and get out there and find ways to partner with reform and advocacy organizations, going back to your states, to put that pressure. Because one thing that I've noticed when I've worked at the state level with working groups and other task force that are charged is that there's no amount of pressure that we can put on. It's very easy to sit down in a closed room and listen to a bunch of data, and at the end of the day come out with an important but very modest reform. And if they don't have the stakeholder engagement, they don't have the communities and pressure, that's the thing that I think is lacking from this movement. And I'm not saying that the folks aren't out there working really hard on this stuff. But to connect the work that you're doing with the folks who are in the state legislatures and they're at the federal level, to make that connection, that to me is the missing link. And that to me is the challenge that I like to put out. The folks here and other folks out there is, let's get our stuff together, let's get your stories out there, and let's get those sort of things that are actually making a difference, because that to me is going to have more power than any amount of data analysis or any amount of research that we could possibly put out there.
Awesome, and I can't think of a better segue now into hearing some of those stories. We're going to start with Noe Soriano. If you haven't read his account in the program, I highly recommend it. It's a heck of a piece. I really enjoyed it, and I think we're going to hear a little bit of that story here now.
How we doing? For you guys that don't know me, my name is Noe Soriano. I'm not a big speaker, but I'll do my best. I've been blessed to be in Oxford House. I'm not from Oklahoma, but that's where I ended up in Oxford House. My story starts in East LA, California, born and raised. Obviously, as a kid, I didn't have too much growing up. We were poor. My mom and dad kind of split up when I was a little kid, so I ended up in the barrio or the ghetto. And my mom tried to raise 5 kids on her own. It was a challenge for, I was the oldest boy in the family, but I got into some troubles here and there. I lived my life at a young age. I started getting into trouble trying to bring food to the house. It was kind of surreal to me. I mean, anyways, I'm kind of nervous, by the way. So forgive me. So anyways, I grew up in East LA, and I got in trouble when I was a kid, man. I was in and out of juvenile hall my whole childhood. When I was 15 years old, finally caught a 10th murder case. Went to the California Youth Authority and did 5 years. I got out when I was 21. When I was in Youth Authority, I kind of started earning a reputation of being a bad kid and having some, what they call hands. I used to like to fight a lot. And so when I got out, I ended up in my old neighborhood, and I went to live with my dad. And it goes back to what Mr. Malloy was saying. I mean, once you go in and out of jail, you end up in the same neighborhood doing the same thing over and over again. It was just a cycle for me. I started getting a reputation to being the bad guy in the neighborhood, the one that was always quick to get into trouble, and I started using drugs. I think that right there, when I started doing that, my whole life just seemed like it was just on a spiral. I started dealing drugs, and I got involved with some heavy guys that were pushing major weight. And in doing so, I got affiliated with the Mexican Mafia of California. And I became a shot caller for my neighborhood, got a little stroke, and so I was walking all over since whole Southern California. I could go to any neighborhood, tax anybody, any neighborhoods that any guys are selling marijuana, selling cocaine, selling whatever, I was getting the cut. And if they didn't pay, we had methods of getting our money back. And so, but then I got into methamphetamine. Once I started getting methamphetamine, I couldn't trust anybody. I started doing it seemed like everybody was just after me. I mean, I had to watch my back from everybody, and I couldn't. So I mean, it was just got chaotic for me. I started getting some routes. I started going to Washington, moving cocaine and meth, and then I got to heroin market. And once I started pushing heroin, it seemed like the money was more coming in, and the quantity, bundles was smaller. And so it became wise for me to start moving heroin because, the bundles are smaller, but the money was bigger. So I got into trafficking distribution, and that got me in a whole lot of trouble. I mean, it was just, so yeah, I was just all over, it seemed like all over the place, and I was always high. I could never sleep. It seemed like I had to chase that dollar every single day, collect money. So I started moving my own drugs because I couldn't trust a driver to drive my drugs. I didn't want to get that phone call. I just lost this shipment, man. What you mean? I left the car or whatever. So, once we go back to when I got arrested. I was heading to St. Louis, Missouri. I used to drop off a lot of heroin out there, and Chicago, Illinois. But this specific time, I was going to St. Louis, Missouri. I had about 2.5 pounds of pure heroin, and I was driving through the state of Oklahoma. business. They pulled me over for being Mexican. That's what. That's exactly what happened. Exactly. So they get behind me to pull me over, and I said, "What's going on?" "You were swerving." "No, I wasn't. You were swerving." I said, "All right." So they asked me for my information. I gave them all my information. I told them I was going to St. Louis visit some friends. While they were talking to me, they were trying to run this dog around the vehicle. The dog never hit. They said it did, and that was enough for them to cuff me up. They took the car into this garage and found the drugs and put me in the county jail. When I sat in the county jail, I made some phone calls and called my homeboys, it's my associates, and try to call some people for some lawyer money and bail money, and nobody came to bat. That's when you find out who really got your back. So I sat there and I went down to started going to the courts and whatever. And I remember asking my public defender, what are they talking about? How much time are we looking at? What can we do? Working deals. They say, you know what, they're firm. I'm 45. 45? I said, you gotta be kidding me. Who the fuck did I kill? Excuse my language, man. California murder carries 25 to life. Oklahoma, Tri-County with 45 years. My next court day, they dropped it to 30, and I sat in that county jail for 2 years fighting that case, and they were pretty firm on that 30. They was not gonna go any lower than that. Finally, after 2 years, I told my lawyer, we gotta make a deal. I mean, you just give me anything. They said they willing to deal 15. I said, where I signed. I couldn't take that trial because the way Oklahoma works, you go to trial, you lose that case, you're gonna get the heaviest penalty there is. I left a 3-month old daughter back home that I need to get back to. So I took that 15 years. Since I had affiliations back home with the people I used to run with, the majority of that time I spent at McAllister, which is a maximum security prison. Half of that time I was single celled, and half of that had no books, no nothing. It was kind of harsh punishment. They said I had a lot of influence over the Mexicans or whatever. I was just trying to get home. I was trying to do my time and get right. When I was in that cell, I kind of made a conscious decision that I was done with everything. Like I said, the homeboys, that old life that we had, they weren't there. Nobody wrote, nobody visited. And I used to try to justify it because I was in the state of Oklahoma, which was 1,000 miles away from home. But I had decided that I was going to be done with that life. No mas, like Roberto Duran said, no mas. So I went up for parole. One time, got denied. Second time, got denied. Third time, got denied. I was going to say, wow. Finally, hire a lawyer, and because I can never go to the board meeting because I was in a high maximum security. So my jacket had to go to the board, and all they do is just look at the jacket and see my affiliations and close it. So hire a lawyer, and he went over and spoke for me, and I was granted parole. I was granted parole in February of 2013, which is 2 years ago. I had some money saved up on my books, canteen money that I was saving just so when I got out, I figured out what exactly I was going to do. Once I made parole, I talked to my case manager. I told my case manager, so where am I going to go? He says, I don't know. We're going to find you a place. I said, great. He came back and says, Carver Center is gonna take you. Once you get out, you go over there and you're gonna go to Carver Center. I said, all right, awesome. They put me in the bus, gave me my check, and gave me this state ID. You guys familiar with it, right? That's prison ID. They put me in the bus, get to Oklahoma City. Once I'm on Oklahoma City, get off from the Greyhound station, and I asked what directions the Carver Center. They said that way, and I walk. I was not trying to spend any money on any cabs or nothing. I had to walk. It was around 10 o'clock at night. I got to the Carver Center, and Carver Center, who are you? I told them my name. My name is North Soriano. I just got out the walls, and they said, we don't got your jacket. We don't got nothing for you. Well, what should I do? Well, you can't stay here. So it was kind of depressing. I figured I'd just go find some place to go. Went down the street and found a hotel and went to the hotel. And I was wondering what was I going to do, what directions I was going to take. I said, my mind was set to try to do the right things. So the next day I humped it down to the parole office, which is a wrong place. It was in downtown. It said I forget what it was. Where's that parole office at, Jake? Yeah, so they said that was the wrong place. I had to go downtown, take my mugshot, take fingerprints and all that. So I humped it back over there, did that, and humped it back to the parole office. When I got to the parole office, I sat there in that lobby, talked to, they called me in, talked to my parole officer, which was Dangerfield, his name was. And I went in there and we got to talking about my plans and all this. And then I brought up the Carver Center. They didn't have my paperwork. What should I do? They says, you know what? You could just go walk down the street and there's a homeless shelter down there. Homeless shelter? I'm not going to no homeless shelter, man. I mean, I was supposed to go to Carver Center. Well, I don't know what to tell you, but you gotta move around. I went outside, man, and I sat on the curb, wondering what I was going to do. I had made a decision I wasn't going to go back to that old life. But that decision flew out the window right there and then. I said, I'm not going to homeless shelter. I'm just going to jump on the ground, go to Mexico, contact my family. I knew my family was out there with the Michoacan Mexican cartel. I said, I'm gonna go back home and hit it. Around that moment that I was making that decision, a lady came out. So you're the guy that only got a place to go? I said, yeah, that's me. Come in. She took me back in there and asked me, have you ever heard of Oxford House? I said, no, I never heard of Oxford House. She said, so we're living home. They help addicts. I was looking at your jacket. You're in some deep stuff, weren't you? I said, yes, I was. They made a phone call, called the Dimmer House in Oklahoma City. She said, I'm gonna drop you off, so you just got to figure it out. I still didn't know much about Oxford House, so I said, great, they got a spot for me. So I get dropped off in Dimmer House, and the house took a look at me and said, we don't got room for you. It still is. But you know what? In Dimmer's House Defense, I remember that after they made that statement, said, but don't worry, we're going to find you a house. They called a few houses in Lakeview had a position, but they didn't have their meeting till Monday, so they dropped me because it was a Friday so that we could couch them. I ended up in the Lakeview house. I ended up in the couch on Friday waiting for that meeting to happen on Monday. And on the road over there, they kind of explained to me what the Oxford House operas that get voted in. I remember hitting that and said, I'm going to get in this house. I cleaned the whole front yard, backyard, garage, cleaned the dishes, mop, sweat, restrooms. Monday came, they had their meeting and said, you're in. Little did I know that was the beginning of something great. It was a journey that I'm still riding, I'm still loving. Not that long after that, I went to a chapter meeting. I think it was 2 days later, or that very next day. I think it was a Saturday or Sunday. I forget when we were having our chapter meeting. Jackson was out there. I got to know some people there and got to know what Oxford House was about, and heard the convention, the state convention was coming in May, got involved in that. I got elected to comptroller at the House. Started volunteering for doing a lot of stuff, and head out to a state convention in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah. Got to the convention, and Jackson made an announcement that we were going to have a new outreach guy, and his name was Dan Hahn. He was coming from Missouri, and I remember just seeking him out, and I asked him, Kansas, yeah, them Chiefs. Yeah, I remember going up to Dan and telling him, hey, Dan, so you're going to be the new guy out there? Yeah, my name's Noah Soriano, man. I'm new in Oxford House, but whatever you need, I'm here for you, man. I'll be that guy. I need to get educated on a lot of stuff, and I'm willing to learn. He said, I got you. Don't worry about it. We're going to make this happen. Not that long after that, I became the president of Lakeview, and from there I became a housing service chair. Got elected to chapter chair, and then from there to a state chair for the housing services. I was just running. Reentry was my passion. I understood where everybody was, where I was at a few months back. The case managers in prison are not educated by Oxford House. Nobody really knows about it. In Oklahoma, it's really reluctant on letting people visit some institutions. Inmates are not allowed to make phone calls out without being collect costs. So case manager were never allowed to call a house or none of that. So that was once we started opening the door, and we got a meeting with DOC in Oklahoma, and everything seemed to change from there on. Everything started changing from there. I started working. I got an opportunity to get into a business, Lifeline program. I became the #1 sales guy in Oklahoma City, working for Stephen Blundell, working for a great company, Direct Sales Professionals. We got a great guy running that company named Stephen Blundell. He gave me an opportunity that I can never repay. With that, California opened up, so I asked for an interstate compact, changed it to another state, and I run my own business in California. Been doing it for quite some time now. got to California 4th of July of last year. Only been in California for a year some change. I've been out of prison for 2 years and change, and met a wonderful woman, Roselia, last year, and just 2 days ago, we got married. I truly, truly believe that Oxford House saved my life. Without that lady calling me in and telling me about Oxford House, there's no telling where I would have been at. So I just want to thank everybody that came to DC and came here to hear us speak. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nobody wants to follow that. But Dan, you're the logical choice. So, Dan on.
I knew that was going to happen. I was going to follow that up. My name's Dan Hahn. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. I've been sober since July 18th, 07. What I want to talk about today, I'm not going to take that much time because, like I say, you can't follow that up. I want to tell you, just qualify myself a little bit and what happened to me and where I'm at today. But what I really want to talk about is how this reentry piece fits with the Oxford House model. You know, how it meshes together, and I think I can do it in a short amount of time, and I know there's people that are available to answer questions past this, so I don't eat up a bunch of time, but I have 14 felony convictions and 3 different DOC numbers in 3 different states. I've done a total of 34 months of my life behind bars in various institutions all over Middle America. And today I'm the outreach coordinator for recently just Oklahoma City. It was Central Oklahoma, now I'm just Oklahoma City metro area. And that was because somebody gave me a chance, okay? And what I want to talk about is how Oxford House can be a part of reentry. In my eyes, and that's not the setting we're in today, but in my eyes, reentry is more than just the criminal justice system. It's anyone that doesn't have the finances to get into our houses. You know, we're re-entering society. If you have no legal tender, you are needing to re-enter in one way or another. And that's something that I moved into the College Hill Oxford House in early 2008 in Wichita, Kansas. And I want to back up. In 2003, I was finishing up a sentence for ID theft and forgery in Norton Correctional Facility in Kansas, and it was Mr. Malloy told my story earlier. He said that when you come out, your drug dealer's waiting for you, and that's exactly what happened to me in 2003. Kansas wasn't very strict about where you were going to, and they just said, we need an address. And I spent almost 2 years walking around a cement track telling myself how I was going to do different and how I was going to do better. And ultimately, when I had nobody on the outside, and that's something Noe mentioned, when we go to prison, there's never anyone there. You know, my mom was in a position of, you're going to figure this out on your own. She finally got smart enough to understand that enablement didn't work. And I believe that today, that in this recovery piece, enablement is not a part of it. We have to come out of this on our own. And I had nowhere to go, and I gave them an address, And I went right back to my drug dealer. He said, thanks for not telling on me. Here's some money, here's some product, and off I went again. You know, and when I look at it today, I'm very proud of what happened to me after '03, because I wouldn't be the person I am today without that. But at the same time, I also look back and say, if I would have had that brochure or had known about Oxford House, and they would have got a hold of me at that point, I had a desire to do well. But you know, the things I thought about when I was locked up was, where am I going to get air conditioning? Where am I going to get, I love to watch sports, and I'm not going to have cable. I'm not going to have these things. You know, and those are things that are important to somebody like me, you know? And when, you know, just being able to how am I going to get it without going back to my old ways? So we get me in an Oxford House after all these problems that I'm not going to re-offending, constant problems going back through the system. And in '08, I found myself in the College Hill Oxford House. And at my second housing services meeting, I walked up to Victor Fitz, and I'm sure some of you in this room know Victor. He used to be the World Council Chair. And this is something that I want everyone in here to really hear what I'm saying. This comment right here changed my life, and it changed my whole approach to Oxford House. I walked up to Mr. Fitz and I said, how can I get people out of prison? Because I remembered how I felt in '03. And he looked me in the eye, and this is what I want you all to hear. And he said, if there's something you believe in, go after it. You don't have to be an outreach worker, a chapter chair. All you have to be is a member in good standing in an Oxford House to get involved and make a difference. And most importantly, and so, you know, that became a passion of mine since then, and I've been fortunate to be around a lot of people. We, residents in Kansas, created a reentry program with the state of Washington's help that was very beneficial in helping getting people out of prison. And going into Oklahoma City, and I'm going to point to what I was just talking about a second ago, I was busy working with houses and trying to build a network of houses, and Noe set up the meeting to get us started. And we attended that meeting, and I came in as an outreach worker, but Noe was, he built a good relationship with his corrections officer, his parole officer, and said, we want to have a meeting. And all of us alumni and outreach came in, and we've created a reentry program in Oklahoma City that I feel is tremendous. You know, the state that I'm proud to work in, people don't have any money coming out. They have ankle monitors on their legs, and I have houses that have, you know, learned to provide that first tradition. Okay, and this is where the model connects to reentry. Our first tradition talks about housing and rehabilitative support. And the only way you're going to provide rehabilitative support is caring about giving someone a second chance. And I firmly believe that second chance is non-negotiable, because then we go to the fourth tradition, which talks about the example of people going to meetings is contagious. We're not talking about coming in and providing somebody a roof. We're talking about connecting them to a 12-step program, getting them a sponsor. And showing them a new way to live by the example of the seasoned members in the house living that way. And what it takes most of all is some of the super salesman in the A tradition. And that can be anybody going out and spreading the good news of what Oxford House is and putting it in front of as many people as we can. So, you know, I would have never dreamed in 1997 when I got my divorce and realized that my functioning alcoholism and drug addiction was not functional at all. I would have never dreamed that I would be in a position to be involved with a group of people from all across the world that are committed to helping others. And today, what matters to me most is not just the person coming out of the criminal justice system, but it's the action involved in the residents in the houses giving of themselves to help someone that doesn't have it. Not a hand up, or not a handout, but a hand up. Okay? Any one of us, and it's the same thing that Mr. Fitz told me. If you believe in something, go after it. And the more that we get reaching out to people that are in need and lifting them up and getting them in our houses and showing them that 12-step meeting hall, they're going to pass it on to others. It's a tremendous honor for me to sit up here with a group of people like this that are all committed to the same thing. So the thing that I ask of all of you out there today is when this convention ends and we go back to our houses, is teaching the advantages of giving people a chance and what that does for our own program. Because when you see, they're not all going to make it, but when they do, boy, it just makes it all the better. I love you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And in case you all thought this was an Oklahoma-only panel discussion, we're gonna continue the outreach theme, but we're gonna turn to this side of the table now. We're gonna take it to North Carolina, and I'm gonna ask Curtis Taylor.
He said Curtis Taylor. Y'all can clap louder than that. We didn't come here to play. We didn't come here to play. The first thing I want to do is I want this room is off the chain, it's blowing me away. But I want this room to help me to thank our founder, Paul Malloy, for having the courage 40 years ago, him and those other 12 men in that halfway house being shut down, for having the courage to rip that house themselves. That was 40 years ago. I was 4 years old. I didn't even know what a crack pipe was. But this guy, this gentleman over here, was paving the way to make sure that when the time came and I had a need, that my need was met. Thank you, God. My name is Curtis Taylor. I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is that I have not used alcohol or any other drug in almost 13 years now. I give my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ 100% credit for being able to stand here and say that. Oxford House is not a faith-based program, but I most certainly am. I was sitting over there about to cry, listening to Noe's story, thinking about my story, and then I said, well, dog, Paul got a story, Marty got one. This whole room is full of stories, full of, like Marty would say, full of freaking miracles. And, I just get so full. And there's so much that I can say, but we don't have time to sit here and listen to Curtis run his mouth today, so I'll try to cut to the chase. I was an addict. I was homeless. I was on the street selling dummies was my occupation. I was derelict. I was that greasy guy in the parking lot bumming chains trying to work up a pint of wine. I found Oxford House and I found recovery in 1996, and I managed to put together about 4 years clean. I moved out of Oxford House, got married, and for whatever reason, I relapsed. In 2002, I suffered my last and final relapse. And for whatever reason, on this particular day, during that relapse, I didn't have any dummies in my pocket, so I sold this undercover cop a real piece of crack. And it just so happened that they were videotaping this transaction. You know, it's a little itty bitty piece of rock, you know. I think I got like $25, $30 for it, or whatever it was. And so in Raleigh, North Carolina, what they had back then was what they call secret indictments. So they would just ride through the hood and make purchases, and they would videotape every single purchase, and when they got finished, they had a stack of papers, and each paper was a person with their photograph, and they would just ride around and arrest them. I got caught up in that little sting. I wasn't a drug dealer. I was a crackhead. I was a good crackhead. But, you know, during active addiction, you know, like many folks in this room, I'd spent years in jail. Not in a row, you know, a few months at a time. Never had been to prison. I was always able to somehow or another, just God's grace and mercy, I would get probation, I would get time served, I would get whatever the case may be, the alternative to prison. And so there I was, 31 years old. I was facing 110 months for selling a little itty bitty piece of crack. And what I need to say is that on December 23rd, 2002, I surrendered. I surrendered to God. And right after that, I had to surrender to the authorities of North Carolina Department of Corrections. So I say that to say that I was done. I was done. Prison didn't save me. God saved me. Prison was just happened to be the place I had to go at the time, because I had to clean up some garbage in my life. When I got to prison and I looked around, you know, the gentleman from the Urban Institute, he's got a load of data, and I'm gonna get with him later on, but he didn't talk about this, but you know, there's a racial disparity in prison in America. You know, America makes up 5% of the world's population, 25% of the prison population worldwide, but African Americans, let me put it to you this way. There's more African Americans in prison today than the total number of slaves that there ever were in America. Yeah. And when I got inside and I looked around and I seen all these different shades of brown, dark-skinned people with blue eyes and all this straight hair, I'm like, man, where are you from? People I'd never seen before in the street, and I saw all this talent. People able to draw. They could draw you, and it looked better than a Polaroid. And I remember going by and visiting different people's bunks, and they would open up the little locker, and there would be Polaroid pictures of their beautiful, beautiful children growing up without daddy. And I remember determining within myself that given an opportunity, that I was going to do whatever I could to have some type of impact on the recidivism rate, so that father and that mother could get out of prison and stay out of prison. And they could be at home raising those children so that those children never grew up to become inmates. I came home. I came home from prison in 2004, May 25th, 2004. I had absolutely nothing. I had on white kitchen pants from the prison, a pair of Rydell sneakers from the canteen, and a white t-shirt. I didn't even have a change of underwear. I had nothing. And I thought I was going to the shelter because I had no place to go. But if I was going to the shelter, I was going to the shelter saying, thank you, Jesus, for having a shelter for me to go to. I was no longer blaming other people, places, and things for my behavior. I was locked up in prison because I sold a piece of rock to an undercover cop. Not because it wasn't the cop's fault. It wasn't the judge's fault. It wasn't society's fault. That was a decision that I made, and I owned up to it. because of my relationship with Oxford House, you know, I was in Oxford House in 1996. I've been to every world convention except the one in 2002 and 2003. 2002, I was on the street using. 2003, I was incarcerated. So I've been to 15 out of the 17. And I knew a young lady in Raleigh, North Carolina by the name of Kathleen Myers. Now she's Kathleen Gibson. And, you know, I had been the first North Carolina State Association chairperson. I had been all these different, I was told today that those weren't titles, those were positions. And without my knowledge, Kathleen and her husband Keith had been praying about me and talking about me. And lo and behold, I walk out of the prison gate and Kathleen is sitting in a truck, crying. Come on, get on in. We've been talking about you and praying about you. We decided you're going to come stay with us for a few days while we get you situated. Don't worry about nothing, just get in the truck. Now I'm crying. I wouldn't have known to pray that prayer. How do I get on my knees and say, oh, dear God, please, you miraculously let somebody I haven't talked to in 2 years be at the prison gate waiting on me to take me into their home, a convicted felon freshly released from prison with absolutely nothing. But that's what he did for me. I moved in with Kathleen and Keith. Keith opened up his closet and said, man, if you can fit it, you can get it. He shops at the mall, so it was Nautica and Tommy Hilfiger. And I went from having no clothes to being the best dressed guy in Raleigh. And Kathleen had scheduled me an interview over at Oxford House Crosslink, my alma mater, best Oxford House in the world, by the way. And I didn't know it, but Crosslink had been giving Kathleen a fit for about, I don't know, probably about 8-9 months. So she had ulterior motives. She wanted me to move in there and help fix the house. I had no problem with that. So time went on, and you know, I began to, you know, kind of conversate with Kathleen and talk to her about my experiences in prison. And you know how Kathleen is. She's very solution-oriented. And so with her help, we started reaching out to the state government and asking for assistance to help people that are incarcerated, that are also in recovery, to help them get into Oxford House upon release from prison. Well, the Department of Corrections said, you know, that sounds like a great idea. And they rolled out the red carpet for us as far as being able to get those telephone interviews and get access to information and access to the inmates. Case managers treat me like their colleague. But they also said in the same breath, now we don't have any money. We can't afford to give you 1 penny out of our $1 billion budget to help any of these folks pay their rent or equal expense share in the Oxford House. Right, okay. So, you know, like any good addict, you know, we don't take no for an answer. So every opportunity I got, they put a microphone in front of me, that was what I mentioned. And so, never be afraid to stand up and advocate for people who cannot advocate for themselves, because you never know who's in the room listening. So somebody from the Division of Developmental Disabilities and Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services in the state of North Carolina caught wind of what we were trying to do, and they gave us a little pot of money to hire what we called reentry coordinators. One of those reentry coordinators at the time was a gentleman named Lester Fleming, who passed away from health reasons, and I became pretty much the reentry coordinator in my state. The other person that's been very instrumental in North Carolina with that is Paula Harrington, our special projects person. And but if you can imagine, there's 100 counties in North Carolina. Today there's like 65 prisons. There's almost 200 Oxford houses. And any person that's incarcerated, that's in recovery, that's interested in Oxford House, sends me a fax. Their case manager faxes their 5-page application to me. And I do my best to try to help them find placement in one of our houses. Obviously, the job is too big for one person. I lean on another colleague, Karen McKinnon. I lean on all the outreach staff in the whole state when it comes time to try to help place these individuals. But the task is too large. People still slip through the cracks. They do. But one thing I'm determined about is that, see, it's real easy for a person to become a number, a person to become a file in a manila folder sitting in a file cabinet somewhere. And I'm determined not to ever forget. I'll never forget what it felt like to sit in the dorm, in the prison, and listen to the mail call day after day, week after week, and never hear my name. Wonder what my little son was looking like and what his first words were going to be, because I was going to miss them. I'll never forget what it feels like to stand in a line with a bunch of old rusty men waiting to get handed a couple pairs of drawers that the next man was wearing last week. I'm not confused about where I've been and the things that I put myself through. And it's only by God's grace and mercy that I am where I am today. I'm a freaking homeowner today, a business owner today, reentry coordinator, outreach worker. I'm a father, I'm a husband. I'm the chair of so many things I'm not even gonna try to list them. I got the opportunity to fly to Hawaii and talk about reentry. Are you kidding me? I'm a crackhead from the streets of Raleigh, North Carolina. In North Carolina, the majority of the houses will accept you in without money. And the reason why is because there is no money. So if you're not accepting people that don't have any money, all the houses are going to be empty. That's the reality. But what I explain to people as I do their assessment, I say, now this is not a situation where you're going to be able to come home from prison, move into an Oxford house with no money up front, find a job, finally start working that job, and then work long enough to get a paycheck and start paying. I said, no. That could take a month and a half, 2 months before you get your first paycheck from an actual full-time job. You're going to have to pay whether you have a job or not. Oxford House is not for everybody, and it never will be. You can either afford to live there or you can't. What you're going to have to do is hit up churches and ask for help. You're going to have to call Aunt Susie and Uncle Joe that you hadn't talked to in 30 years and ask for some help. You're going to have to cut that grass. You're going to have to wash a car, rake some leaves. It equates to about $15.71 a day in my state. The average adult individual, as resourceful as addicts and alcoholics are, can figure out a way to make a good 20 bucks a day. We talk about a hand up, not a hand out, and I'm real careful. I'm real careful with that. In my state, one of the things our state association voted to do was to create this reentry fund, which is awesome. They put a little money aside into this reentry fund, so occasionally when a person moves into one of the houses in our state, I can call John Fox and say, hey, John, I need you to send a check for $210 to Oxford House so-and-so on behalf of Susie or on behalf of Johnny. And that's great. But what I discovered was that, we can't even talk about that. We can't let that information get out, because once it gets out, then there's this sense of entitlement. Well, reentry fund's gonna pay my rent. No, man, you're gonna pay your rent. Or put your key on the table, one or the other. It is not, Oxford House isn't built on somebody else paying and doing things for you. I benefited from Oxford House. Yeah. I I benefited from Oxford House by being given the opportunity to do for myself. To make mistakes, to have success, but to not use one day at a time. That's what Oxford House is about. And so we cannot dilute our model. So even in our asking, when we ask the government or the foundations or whoever we're asking money from, you know, I'm always quick to say, look, we don't need any more than about a month worth of equal expense share for these individuals, because that's not how we're set up. If you're in this room and you got a problem doing a phone interview, if you're in this room and you squinch up your face and squinch up your nose when you hear that you got to interview somebody coming home from prison, and the first thing you want to know is, well, what were they charged with? What are they locked up for? If you're one of those type of people that's forgotten what you did and where you come from, if you're even one of those people that raised your hand and said you've never been to jail, guess what? That's only because you never got caught. I'm a convicted felon many, many times over. But that doesn't make you better than me. That's not my title. My son doesn't wake up in the morning and walk to my room and say, hey, good morning, convicted felon. He reaches over and he hugs me and he says, hey, good morning, Daddy. Everything good? You know? Man, look, I'm sorry, Marty. I'm going to sit down and shut up. You know, drunks, druggies, and crazies, and we are at the freaking Washington Hilton, almost 1,000 of us. If you cannot get excited about Oxford House, you need to check your pulse. Okay? You know, like Paul Malloy said that, you know, most people that go down the road that we took and become addicts and alcoholics, they end up with sad, sad endings. Well, God's been good to me. I've ended up with a happy ending. And truth be told, it's just getting started. The sky is not even a limit. I don't care what prison we crawled out of. The sky is not a limit because God owns the sky and he'll move it out of the way for me and you, if need be.
Thank you, Curtis. And Ryan had another commitment. He still loves you, but he had to run. Next, we're going to turn to Tennessee and Marty.
Man, y'all tough, man. That's a tough act to follow right there, huh? Let's have it for Curtis. Take it, man. Hey, I'll keep it brief. I know everybody wants a cigarette, huh? Just real quick, there's one thing I want to get a picture. It's my junkie butt gets to stand up here and take a picture of you guys. It's gonna be awesome. So I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand. Not yet, but for all you people that have spent more than 30, 60, 90 days in jail, did you ever think in your freaking life you would be in D.C. at the freaking Hilton at Oxford House 40th anniversary doohickey? Did you ever think that? That's a lot of work to get here, huh? It was a lot of work for me. People ask me, I do a lot of presentations, and they're like, what's it take to get into an Oxford House? I mean, like, these are Earth people, right? Because they want to move in too. And I'll tell them, well, go ahead and shoot dope for about 20 years. Steal everything that isn't nailed down. Go to jail many, many times. Go OD several times. several near-death experiences, have everybody freaking hate you, and then show up at our house and we might let you in. Did we win the lottery or what? You know, we shouldn't even be here. But we made it. We made it through all that. We made it through all that to here, right here in D.C. at Oxford House 40th celebration thing. It's awesome. For myself, hang on, I got notes. I had to learn a lot of stuff. I went to, you know, blah, 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 you know, grew up, shot dope, all that stuff. Got arrested, went to jail, got out, went arrested, all that. By the time, I'm a little butthurt because you had 14 felonies and only did like 30-something months. I got 13 felonies and had to do like 127 months. That sucked. I needed this guy. That would have been awesome. But what I thought there was a big lie that I bought very early on, and I thought the way to live, it was called the criminal code. Has anybody heard of that? I thought that was the blueprint for life. The criminal code is mind your own business, right? Don't tell nothing. Nothing. Don't tell nothing. Don't admit to nothing. Ever. You freaking crazy? Any money is good money. Just get the money. Get it. And don't tell how you got it. It's always someone else's fault. It's my PO. It's a cop. We touched on that, a couple of that. It's, you know, it's not my fault. It is your fault. No personal responsibility whatsoever at any time. And if I did have personal responsibility, I'm not going to admit it. Okay, so I go to treatment. You know, I'm so done. I'm freaking done. I'm smelling people's feet and all that stuff. I'm eating hot dog, whatever. I'm in treatment in Columbia River Correctional Institute in Oregon. And is Oregon here? That's cool. Okay. They have a place called Turning Point at Columbia River Correctional, and I went to 9 months. I needed 9 months of treatment in prison. I needed every freaking bit of it. All you guys that have gotten sober and stayed sober on a 28-day program, let's have a round of applause for them. Because they're better than me. I needed every bit of 9 months. Every bit of it. And I still need more. I needed, I needed all that. And in my last 30 days, they were talking about, well, where are you going to go when you get out? Well, I'm going to go... I don't know. You know, I mean, it's so basic. It's like, well, I got a plan, but I don't know what it is, but I'll get one. And they talked about, at that point, there was actually 6 houses in Portland. There were 6 Oxford houses, and my counselor, Edie, had 7 years of sobriety. Somehow she knew about it, and she said, well, you might want to check out this Oxford House thing. And I'm like, what is Oxford House? And she's like, well, it's a recovery home, and you know, they stay sober, and they work a 12-step program. It's very inexpensive, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, my only question was, are there girls there? She's like, no, it's a men's, they're gender specific. I'm like, well, that's not fun, man. She said, just try it. Just try it, shut up, try it for 90 days. Try it. It was a 90-day commitment. And I said, okay, I'll follow suggestion. I was actually at the point where I was admitting fault. I was taking personal responsibility. I was trying to be aware of things around me. I was trying to just behave. One thing that happens when you get in, when I got into recovery, is this thing in here, this heart, is bigger than I ever freaking thought it would be. You know, my conscience, the first thing I prayed for change, and the first thing that God gave me it was the last thing I wanted, and that was a conscience. I know full well when I'm doing dirty. I know when I'm being dishonest. I know this. And so she said I had to surround myself with people that were doing the same thing I was. And I've never been in a self-run, self-governed, I never was an equal. I always had to find who was in charge and try to smooch them or whatever. They voted my butt into the Mount Tabor house. I don't know why, you know. Are they here? Is the Tabor house here? You're the man, dude! Thank you. Because I had to show up to my interview and, yeah, Dean's still there, I know. But I showed up in my Columbia River Correctional Institute stuff, you know, a little great outfit they give you, and I had a little job, and you guys voted me in. You weren't gonna vote me in. They're not good. These guys are not gonna vote me in. And I filled out my little application, and I told them I was sincere, and I needed a place to go, and yes, I could afford this. Well, I think it was $60 a week back then. And they said they voted me in, right out of prison. How many people here again have been right out of prison into Oxford House? Can we see a show of hands? That's a start. That's a good start, because please, like Curtis was saying and things like that, we need to remember where we come from. But you know, please, let's do phone interviews. A big deal. It's very difficult. Remember sitting on that slab, waiting on a roll of toilet paper, lunchtime's in 5 minutes or whatever, and you can't use the phone. How are you going to get connected? This is one of the most powerful things that you can do in Oxford House, is that reentry piece. It's like, try to bend our schedules a little bit. Things like that. To make it simple for the person that really does want to change their life, to get the message of opportunity to them, and then let's take it a little step further and kind of work with the prisons, work with the jails, work with the work releases and things like that, to make it easy for their transition, so when they show up, like I did, scared. I'm like, I've never been released. What do we do when we get released from prison? My mind was always like, I'm gonna get high up first, because I deserve it, right? After all that I just went through, I'm gonna party tonight. And then tomorrow, I'm gonna get my life together. Right? Because boy, when tomorrow comes, it's on. But right now, it's time to get lit. And I didn't know, I did that for years, and that is what was killing me. That first drink and drug. I never put that together until I went to frickin' treatment, and they told something real basic. It was like, look, the first one is the one that causes you to do more. So how about we just don't do the first one? So I'm all in with that because I want a cigarette too, but I got a story. I was a forklift driver up there in Northwest Portland, up by Esco, and I would have to drive all the way to 39th and Powell or whatever. And one day I was like, you know what? It's payday. And I was living at the Creston Oxford, and I was thinking, I'm probably gonna get loaded today, you know. And I'll just act like I'm not loaded. We see that a lot too, right? So I'm driving, I'm thinking about, you know, because I'll get these little thoughts, and they go away. They do. They go out, you know, you're going to want to use, and then 10 minutes later, it goes away. You have a cigarette. And I picked this guy up. He was a skateboarder, and there was a big hill. He he was walking, and he was hitchhiking. So I picked him up, and he's like, "Oh God, this is a trip." I pick him up. He's like, "You're gonna, dude, where's the party?" And I'm like, "Man, we could stop and we could get some beers, man, if you want." He's like, "Yeah, six pack, yeah." He's a hippie. Oregon's got a lot of them, man. Then I said, we could even, if you want, we can go, after we get some beer, we can get some weeds, get some weed. He's like, "Yeah, dude, buds, bud." I mean, he's tripping, the dreadlocks and everything. And I'm like, "Well, then after we get some weed, we could probably get some cocaine if you want." And he's like, "Dude, yeah, dude." And I said, "Well, then we can go get some heroin and get some rigs and do some speedball." He's like, "Dude." And then we can break into your parents' house and get their checkbook because we want the party to keep going, right? Dude, I'm good right here, man. I'm good. Let me out. So, what I learned is that we do recover. God bless each and every one of you. Thank God we made it here, and enjoy the rest of the week.
People like you, I mean, you actually seem to have an official fan club. All right, we've got one more speaker from, couldn't get any closer, right here in D.C. Steve Poem is going to join us.
All right, my name's Steve. I'm an addict and alcoholic. All right, I wouldn't be standing up here if it wasn't for Auction House, and if it wasn't for my continued sobriety. I know this has gone on for a while. Everybody has been thoroughly informed and entertained. I'll try to keep it short because you will hear more from me tonight with the 30-year-old clip from the Christian Science Monitor. But real quick, because those of you that don't know, I'm also a convicted felon. I went to prison. I went to Club Fed. I didn't go one of these state joints. I went uptown. All right, I was this is going back some time. Back in the late 70s, I was a cocaine addict. There wasn't any such thing as crack. All right. If we wanted to smoke it, we did something called freebasing, okay? And it was a process where you had to sit down and cook the shit, okay? All right? And you had to be careful not to set yourself on fire. But I was the kind of cocaine addict where freebasing took too much time away from me sitting down and doing cocaine. So I just snorted it, and I have a hole in my nose to prove it. But anyway, I was working at the Justice Department full-time as a paralegal. I was going to law school at night. I had a love affair where I thought was a love affair with cocaine. I was snorting more cocaine than I could afford, but fortunately for me, I knew a lot of people who like to do cocaine. So what does someone do in my position? That's right, we sell cocaine. And fortunately or unfortunately, I had a dealer that did not mind fronting me the cocaine, and he would front me ounces at a time. My dealer got busted in 1983. And at the time he got busted, he had fronted me 8 ounces of cocaine. My dealer made a decision immediately that he was going to cooperate with authorities. And he didn't get around to me until about a year later, but he set up his supplier in Florida and his largest customer in Maryland. And sometime around the turn of the year in 1983, 84, I think the way the story goes is oh yeah, I know a guy at the Justice Department that I sold to who's selling cocaine. And I can just imagine the look on these DEA agents' faces going like, oh, we got the Justice Department cocaine kingpin at work here. All right, so a few weeks later, this guy shows up at my office wearing a wire and engages me in a conversation that went something like this. Hey, Steve, you remember when I got busted? Yeah. You remember I fronted you 12 ounces? I'm not 12 ounces, but 8 ounces of coke? I said, yeah. He says, well, you still owe me 12 grand for it. And I said, no, I don't. I owe you 13.6. You know, you gotta always be honest with your dealer, right? About 10 days later, he calls me up on the phone, which was also recorded, and wanted to know when I was gonna pay him, and I made up a bunch of shit about, yeah, I know, and I'll pay you, and da-da-da-da-da, and, you know, we'll work it out. And about 10 days after that, there was a knock at my door, and there were one morning, and there were 3 DEA agents with a warrant for my arrest. Well, the other interesting thing about all this was that I had graduated from law school in the interim, and I was waiting for the bar results. So my life flashed before my eyes. And all of that work and all of my dreams and all of my aspirations, I thought, went right down the tubes. And I went and retained, at that time, who was told to me to be the best dope lawyer in town. And literally, the first question he asked me, he says, well, what are you going to do about your problem? I'm going like, what problem are we talking about? And he says, well, you got a cocaine problem. I said, I don't have no fucking cocaine problem. I got a problem with the United States government. All right? And I want you to do something about it. He says, well, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, I want you to get me a diversion program. And after he stopped laughing, he said, I don't think you understand the seriousness of your problem. And I go, I'm just a goddamn junkie. Anyway, I went to trial. I lost. I was convicted and there was some government hanky-panky at my trial concerning my expert witness. And I had run out of money, and the only person left in the world to get money from was my father, who I hated asking for money. And he said, you know, I'll help you if you do something to help yourself. And I said, well, what do you have in mind? He says, well, obviously you got a problem. I want to see you get some help. I'm going like, yeah, I got a problem. You're sending your sonny boy to prison, and that's all you can think about? So I talked to some people, and they say, well, why don't you go and see what you can do about it? So I'm unemployed. I don't have any money to go and check into a rehab. I went to one of these outpatient places, and they wanted me to drug test, but I'm still smoking marijuana, as we know is not a drug that causes anybody any problems. And someone suggested that I go to NA. And I said, but I'm not a drug addict. And they said, well, just go. And if it doesn't work out, then you can at least tell your father you tried. And I had 20 million reasons, or at least 20 good reasons why I wasn't a drug addict. I wasn't black, I didn't shoot heroin, I didn't hang around a fire barrel. I was unemployed, okay? But I didn't use heroin. And I didn't know, you know, and I figured I'd show up at the door, they would ask me these questions, and they would say, thank you, but no thank you, you're not one of us, and turn me away. It did not work out like that. All right, I showed up, and all they wanted to know was how they can do, what they could do to help me. This is a short story. And I told them what was happening with me, that I was going to get sentenced, and no one fled. All right, all they wanted to know what was I going to do for my next meeting. And I met my sponsor shortly thereafter, and I started hearing people talking in meetings about Oxford House. You got to understand, this is 1984 here in D.C., where there was only Oxford Houses in D.C. But I heard people talking about Oxford Houses. A couple of weeks later, I went to sentencing. By that time, I had enough NA and AA under my belt to fully understand how I had fucked my life up. I was able to articulate to the judge just what a pitiful addict I was. And the judge acknowledged the fact that I was a pitiful addict. But the problem was that I was a pitiful addict who worked at the Justice Department who sold cocaine while I worked in the criminal division. So I had to pay the price for that. So I got sent off. I got a 3-year sentence, and I was able to self-surrender, and I went off to Club Fed down in the Panhandle of Florida. I had a sponsor. My life, as I knew it, had come to an end. I had no clue, absolutely no fucking clue at all, as to how I was going to put my life back together. Because everything that I had worked for, I thought was down the tubes. It was lost forever. The only thing I knew is that, because I had enough 12-step meetings under my belt, that was how I was going to start rebuilding my life. And every day when I worked out down there and ran around the track, all I could think about was the 8th and 9th step. And not so much about the people I had harmed, but all the people I was assholes to. When I got out of prison, I went and lived in a halfway house in Southeast Washington. Those of you that are familiar with Washington, we have still there. It's called Hope Village. Hope Village. And my sponsor would come and take me to meetings, and he says, well, what are you going to, I was there for 80 days. He says, what are you going to do when you get out of here? And I said, I don't know. I don't have a place to live. He said, well, why don't you go live in an Oxford house? And I said, okay, what about Oxford House? Turns out he had a sponsee that lived at Oxford House, Calorama, which was just up the street from here. It's no longer there. He says, I'll take you over for an interview. And turned out they had a vacancy. And while I was living at Hope Village, I went and I interviewed, and they accepted me, even though I was still living at Hope Village. And they said, what are you getting out? And I must have been like 2 or 3 weeks, and they say, fine. And I made a deposit, and they held my bed until I arrived. And I lived at Oxford House, Calorama for a little over 3 years. I did not, when I moved into Oxford House, Calorama, I literally did not have 2 quarters to rub together. I had a job that barely paid me minimum wage. If it wasn't for Oxford House, Calorama, I don't know what I would have done other than going home to Oklahoma and living with my parents, which was not an option. So the long and short of it is that while I was there, I was able to learn how to live one day at a time. And we talk about reentry, and we talk about being able to get jobs. I wanted to work in the legal field. I would apply to these law firms for jobs. And this being a program of complete honesty, I would make some reference on my resume so it came out when I was talking to these folks in interviews that I was locked up for a couple of years. And there was one interview that I thought went particularly well, and then the guy called me and he says, well, we're not going to be able to hire you. And I said, why not? I thought it went real well. He says, well, you're a convicted felon. And I said, so? I'm applying for a paralegal position. And he says, well, how are we going to explain that to our clients? And I'm going like, well, why do your clients have to know? Anyway, I didn't get the job. I did work for a law firm, and that didn't pan out. I got fired from that because I wasn't fast enough or quick enough, whatever. Anyway, I met Paul along the way in trying to get admitted to the bar because I started participating in the lawyers counseling program. And Paul and I struck a bargain, so to speak. He would help me get admitted to the bar, and I would help him do the Oxford House thing and start expanding Oxford House. And so one of the reasons... And of course, living and working for Oxford House, having a criminal background is a plus. It's almost a job requirement. It's a hell of a way to get experience, but life takes us on these journeys. And as they say in the program, when you got lemons, you make lemonade. And that used to be my attitude at Club Fed. I'm going like, everybody used to say, why are you got a smile on your face? And I said, because I got the biggest lemonade stand in the world right here. Because I had time to think about myself, to work on myself, to understand how in the hell I ended up in a place like Club Fed, and what I was going to do to change my life. In any event, the long and short of it is that I wanted to become a member of the DC Bar. While I was doing all of this, the DC Court of Appeals admitted a guy who had been convicted of second-degree murder. And Paul in the Lawyers Counseling Program said to me, if this guy can get in, you can get in. And I'm going like, but I'm a drug dealer, and I'm a drug dealer, I worked at the Justice Department. Said, if this guy can get in, you can get in. And one of the promises is that living in Oxford House and working the 12-step programs and staying clean and sober one day at a time and helping another addict and alcoholic get through the day, or providing them with housing or giving them a suggestion, your dreams will be fulfilled. So we applied to the bar. We had a hearing before the admissions committee. In 1988, the admissions committee unanimously recommended that I be admitted. And we had to brief this before the DC Court of Appeals. Don't clap just yet. Don't clap just yet. Because the DC Court of Appeals said no. And the reason they said no was that I had not been rehabilitated long enough. They said, we like what you're doing. Keep doing it up, but the bottom line is you're a lying, dope-dealing scumbag, and we don't think you've been rehabilitated long enough. But if you keep doing what you're doing, maybe one of these days we'll let you in the club. Turns out the lawyer for the admissions committee was in the program. He called me up and encouraged me to keep pursuing my application with the bar. And he said, but this time you have to take the bar exam again. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, you can't rely on your old application. You got to take the bar exam again. So I went and did it, and I didn't remember it being such an awful experience. But of course, the first time I was really fucked up when I took it. So that kind of thing didn't register. In the meantime, I'm working full time for Oxford House, and Paul's taking full advantage of me by paying me, barely above minimum wage. And we're running into all of these zoning disputes. Paul, we've got, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988 has passed. We got contracts in New Jersey and New York and Connecticut and Virginia, and every place we open up a house, we run into a zoning stuff. And Paul says, figure this stuff out. I start reading up on the Fair Housing Act, and we start litigating this stuff in New Jersey, and I'm becoming this expert on the Fair Housing Act. Paul, with his philosophy of we're a family, and with the reasonable accommodation provision of the Fair Housing Act, we start pushing that here's the reasonable accommodation we want you to make. We want you to treat us like a family. And I talked and talked and talked to HUD officials and justice officials. Paul and I had a meeting at the Justice Department about it one time, going like, what is this with the reasonable accommodation in a family? We would explain it, and it's come along. I mean, we win on this because we're a family. But the bottom line is that my story, whether it's unique or not, is a lesson about overcoming what our addiction has brought us to. And as I like to say about the seventh step, the seventh step is about taking our character defects, which were once our stumbling blocks, and making them into our building blocks. All right, and eventually the Court of Appeals did let me in. In September of 1993, they said, based on the nature of your accomplishments, we see no reason to make you wait any longer, even though you've only been, quote unquote, rehabilitated for 6.5 years. And it's mainly because, not so much I stayed clean, that was a major part of it, but because of what I was able to do with my legal education in helping push the Oxford House mission and establishing Oxford Houses and pushing the bounds of the Fair Housing Act and making addicts and alcoholics a protected class in this country. Just as a side note, and I'm going to wrap this up, one of the first things I did after I got sworn in was I went over to Superior Court here and I signed up to become a CJA lawyer, which is court-appointed stuff. And I've been doing that for the last 22 years. And I know, my clients don't know that I'm in recovery, and my clients do not know that I've been to jail. So when they start telling me these hard luck stories about why they can't stay clean or the problems that they have with their POs, I sort of understand that. It's just, fortunately for the criminal defendants in the District of Columbia, Superior Court offers a whole range of drug treatment services for those clients that are in pretrial status. And a lot of clients make it, and a lot of them don't. But one of the things that I still see that's missing, and I don't know why Superior Court and the drug intervention people don't understand it, or why they can't do anything about it, is housing is a missing component. The problem is that my clients and the other clients in Superior Court, at the end of the day, whether they're in drug court, whether they're in sanction-based treatment, end up going back home at the end of the day. And you get dinged in drug court, and you get dinged in sanction-based treatment for relapsing. There are several defendants who do make it into Oxford House, but Oxford House is not made as an option or as a tool that is available on a regular basis to the Superior Court defendants. In large part, I don't know if they can make them do it, but it's something that has always bothered me, and maybe one day something will be done about it. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the convention.
This has run long. I'm going to give it back over to Paul. Hopefully you all have taken some things away from this that can help you back in your home states work on some reentry issues that we've talked about here.
David, thank you very much, and thank all the ex-felons on the panel for driving home the fact that Oxford House provides a useful service. Now, I want you all to stay here because the next 20 minutes are going to be really important. We now have a group of candidates who are running for World Council. And I want to call Eric Keemer up here. Eric, can you come up? Eric is going to be just exactly like Ruthless Paul used to be at all previous conventions, and that is make sure that you stay within the time limits of 2 or 3 minutes to tell why people should vote for you. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Eric. And Eric, you might, do you want the alumni candidates to come up first? Or alumni candidates, why don't you come up first? And Eric will let you give your speeches.
All right, how's everybody doing? My name's Eric Keemer, and I'm an alcoholic. So, I had a little story prepared about my experience giving a speech back in 2011 when I got elected to the World Council. But I'm going to keep that short because we are kind of running short on time. But just to kind of reiterate what the World Council is, it's made up of 12 members who are non-residents, 3 alumni of Oxford House, who serve directly with OHI and Paul Malloy. We are the ones who look at policy recommendations for issues that are affecting Oxford House as a whole. So we really represent you, the residents and alumni members of the overall network of Oxford House. Really is the self-run part of this organization. It's been an honor to serve the last 4 years. I'm so good, I turned a 3-year term into a 4-year term. Don't know how that happened. But first, I'd like to call up, y'all can come on. Y'all don't have to hide, come on. Have a seat, all right. So first up, we're gonna have Chuck Liston from Kansas.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chuck. I'm an alcoholic addict. You know, it's really different for me to be standing up here again this year. After being elected last year, I figured I'd get a little bit of a break. But one of the first things we did on the World Council was fix the rotation, so not all the alumni got elected at one time. Yeah, I've been clean and sober for just about 9 years now. At 6 months clean and sober, I moved into my first Oxford house. Yeah, I got clean in treatment. I learned how to stay clean in my 12-step meetings. But I learned how to live sober in Oxford house. These guys talking about reentry earlier. Whoa, breaking stuff up there. These guys talking about reentry earlier really touched my heart. And when I got an opportunity to do something in reentry for Oxford House, I jumped on it. And it got me involved. You know, I spent 2 terms as Kansas State chair, 1 term as a co-chair, reentry chair for the state association, started chapters, opened many houses, and as an alumni, what I want to do on the World Council is develop a system where any area can take an alumni manual and start an alumni association in their area. How am I doing? Well, I could go on for a long time. I really want to continue what we've started on the council. We've got great people on the council right now that are working really hard together. We've got great committees, and I really would like the opportunity to have your vote to continue the work that I've already started. Thank you, everyone.
Next up, we're going to have Gene Goodwin from Virginia.
Good afternoon, Oxford House family. Hi. Of course, he said, I'm Gene Goodwin, a person in long-term recovery. It means I haven't had a drink or a drug since June 23rd, 2007. I was fortunate enough to move into Oxford House on August 1st, 2007, and I've been involved ever since. The guys in my house told me, if you want to stay sober, get involved in your recovery. And that's what I did. I followed right behind them. Since then, after being in the house for about 6 months, I went straight to the state level. And I started working with our state association. Soon thereafter, I was elected as a state budget finance officer. And plus, during that time, I held every position in our house. I also became chapter officer twice. And not only chapter officer, I was chapter treasurer twice and the chapter chairperson 2 times. Since then, I spent 6 years on the World Council. I was state association chair and I became alumni association chair. I've been committee chairs on both of them. And I enjoyed every minute of working with Oxford House and the World Council and helping do all the things that we do to keep the houses going straight. We developed a state association manual, and we started to get a little bit of work on getting alumni involved again. And last year I didn't make it. I missed out on the vote, but then again, my wife told me that I better not run again, but I did anyway. But this year, I think she wants to kick me back out the house. She said, you need to go do what you do. So I decided to run again and get back into it and do what I do. So I need everybody in here to vote for me. I want to continue back and get back onto the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Okay, we're going to have the AV guy come in and kind of work on the mic for a minute, so while he's doing that. Okay. Next up, we're going to have Adam Spear from the state of Washington.
How we doing, everybody? My name's Adam. I'm a member of long-term recovery. For the last year, I've had the honor and privilege to work with some amazing people on the World Council. I was elected last year as an alumni alternate. Chuck got the voting position, and I sat behind him as an alternate. Well, not really behind him, kind of next to him, kind of off to the side a little bit. But it's been an amazing learning experience for me personally. I got sober when I was 19 years old, and I moved into an Oxford house. Young kid, didn't know how to live, didn't know where I was going, what I was doing with my life. And I'll be 30 the end of this month. And so through that time, I've become a homeowner, a business owner, father, husband, and I have the trust and respect of my family. And more than that, I learn every day, and I want to continue the work that I've been doing. I worked with Matt, who will be up here giving a residency speech, I believe, and I worked with him building the OxfordHouseWorldCouncil.org website. And I'm trying, what I'd like to do personally is I'd like to move the World Council from where it was in the past, in the Stone Age, the 20th century, and move it to the 21st century. You know, we do teleconferences, which is awesome, but, you know, telepresence is much more affordable than it used to be. Video chatting, Skyping, talking to people. And so we can bring everybody together from all over the world, rather than traveling and spending thousands of dollars to travel. We can bring everybody together and actually collaborate and see emotion, which emotion is a big part of communication. So that's really all I've got. Please, I'll be honored to have your vote. I'd be honored to continue the work that I've been doing and to work with these great people. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, next we have Hamilton Barton from Texas.
Hello, everybody. I'm a little nervous. There's a big crowd. I used to do a lot of public speaking, but I was never sober. And I'm afraid now I'm going to make a fool out of myself. My sobriety date is January 19th of 2014. For that, I'm truly grateful. I moved into an Oxford house with just a mere couple days sober. I came off the streets. I spent the last year before I got here living under a bridge, basically. And this is where I've come in 18 months, 19 months. I'm pretty amazed myself by what God's done for me. I was elected chapter chair with less than 2 months sober for Chapter 8, Texas. And that was the beginning. I've done a lot of things in recovery. The main thing is Oxford House taught me how to be a man in recovery. I got a job with a week sober. I've had that job ever since I got here. And this December, I will graduate from UTSA in San Antonio with a paralegal degree. I've served on the state level as state fundraising chair, and I was a charter member last September of Texas's first alumni association. We partnered up with the San Antonio Fundraising Committee, and I believe that we sent 20 people here. And that's at no cost to them. That's pretty amazing. I'm pretty lucky. And what luck means to me is preparation meeting opportunity. And what preparation looks like to me is a lot of work. And when the opportunity for the fruition of my work comes to pass, this is where it brings me. And for me to be up on the stage today is a mere miracle. And I owe glory to God and the people in Oxford with me, who God has used as a vessel to bring me to this point. I would appreciate your vote for World Council. And one of the things that it says, oh, this is a World Council manual, by the way. Y'all got one. I'm a manual person. And the last sentence on what it says the mission of the Oxford World Council is, the Oxford World Council is the guardian of the manuals and the traditions. And I pledge to be that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Last but not least, we have Corey Yancey from North Carolina.
Good afternoon, family. My name is Corey Yancey, aka Fancy Yancey. My clean date is February 3rd, 2012. I moved into Oxford House after spending 14 days in a treatment center, and that was February 21st, 2012. My first year in Oxford House, I held every position that could be held. I raised my hand for everything that could be done. I had the opportunity to open a house, and it was off to the races for me then. I was like, wow, this is fun. Like I said, I have held every position. I've been Wake County Housing Service Secretary, Chapter 11 Housing Service Chair. After our last convention in Portland, Oregon, I was asked to go to Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is about an hour and a half from Raleigh, which I am from, to open up a house. That was October of last year, and I am still in Fayetteville. After that 2 weeks ended, I felt like I needed to stay here because I have a little bit more to give. While in Fayetteville, I got that chapter, which is Chapter 9, on a rotation with the local detox center on every Friday for a presentation. Also, I have worked with the Drug Court of Cumberland County and also the VA hospital. With the 195 houses that North Carolina have, the 22 chapters, and also the home of our COO, Kathleen Gibson, it is time for North Carolina to have someone on the World Council. I hope they get your votes.
Okay, thank you. Keep in mind that residents and alumni can vote for all the alumni members. Only alumni members can vote for alumni members. The ballots will be at our information table directly across from the registration table. You have until noon tomorrow to turn those in. Sherry Glisson, beautifully modeling them back there. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to have all the resident candidates please come up. Thank you, alumni candidates. Like to take this time to let y'all know we're running kind of late, so dinner's going to be served around 6:30. All right, so first off, we're going to start with Ileana Whiteley from Washington. Let's go.
All right, hi guys. Whoa, it works beautifully. I'm Ileana, and I'm a grateful recovering addict from Washington State. And had the honor and the miracle and the blessing of celebrating 3 years clean 9 days ago. I've been in Oxford the entire recovery, and I dove into service work. I have done all house positions, and I'm currently the chore coordinator, and I'm not that scary. I have done chapter treasurer. I'm a chapter, well, I was chapter chair. I stepped down because I stepped up as a state area rep. And I've also been on the World Council for this last year. I came on as an alternate, and I've since then moved up into a voting seat position. And my experience with World Council has been amazing. It's made me grow up so much, to work with people that, inspire me and be able to see that Oxford is something bigger than me. And I want to be something bigger than myself, for something that is so beautiful. If you look around this convention, each and every one of you are blessings and miracles. This program does work. And I'm currently the vice chair, which they saw me fit to do that, and propagation chair. And if you go look at the table out there, there's actually a spreadsheet of all the houses in every state and what resources each state has, like outreach workers, World Council members, state associations. And as a propagation chair, my project is to start working on getting into areas that do not have Oxford or have very little. There are states with none, such as Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, places like that. And then there's California that only has seven houses out of all those addicts. There's Utah with 3, Florida with 3. I want to get into areas that need Oxford, because we have what we have today because of Oxford, and I want to see that keep growing. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Matthew Griffin from Kansas.
Hey everybody, my name is Matthew Griffin, and I'm an addict and an alcoholic. Clean date of December 13th, 2013. I currently live in Oxford House Neum, Hutchinson, Kansas, and one of 3 houses that I helped open up since the convention last year. These are, it's an area where Oxford wasn't, and it wasn't wanted. And so I fully understand what it takes to get into an area that doesn't want you, and there's no outreach to help, and you just got to get in there and do everything. And so I know the struggle, and because of that, I'm going to do things a little different. Can I get a raising of hands of anyone in this room that's going to be part of opening up a house in the next 2 weeks? I see that man back there raise his hand first. Can you come up here for a minute, please? Right there in the gray shirt. Do you have outreach? Do you have outreach helping you? Yeah. How about you, sir? Do you have outreach helping you? Do anybody that doesn't have outreach opening up a house in the next 2 weeks? No one? 3 weeks? 4 weeks? Well, come on back up here, sir. That's all right. Come back. I'm sorry. The reason I'm calling him up here is because I was allotted $500 from the Kansas State Association to do my campaigning with, and no t-shirts, no bracelets, no cards saying my credentials. I got the basic resume of most everybody that you've heard and are gonna hear. I'm gonna take this $500 and I'm gonna go ahead and give it to you guys so that you guys can use it for your house. This is what it's about. And this is what I want to continue to do. Just like Ileana said, we want to get into new places so that people can have comfortable sobriety, because the problem is you got guys opening up houses and women opening up houses and new people going in there, and they're struggling to get the house to where it needs to be instead of focusing on the recovery. And every little bit counts, man. Matt Griffin, vote for me, World Council 2015. Thank you.
That was the first. Never seen anybody just give money out. That's great. All right, next up we have Elizabeth Lynch from Virginia.
So they would put me after the guy who just gave $500 away. My name is Liz Lynch, and I wanted to see if we have Virginia in the house real quick. Awesome. I also want to just say congratulations congratulations to my fellow resident candidates who are up here with me, and to those alumni candidates. Also, I want to just state too that I am currently the chapter chair in Chapter 2 in Virginia Beach, and I also serve as vice chair on the State Association Board. After I gave everything away in my life back in 2012, and I was desperate enough to make a change in my life, I entered into Oxford May 8, 2012, and after about 6 months of living in a fog there, I decided to get active and do service work for Oxford and for both NA and AA programs. I am a 47-year-old mother of 2 incredible boys who are blessings in my life today because I took action and I lived in Oxford, continue to live in Oxford, and I decided to work a very strong program. So those are the blessings that I have in my life today, along with a lot of other things. So today I live my life doing service work completely for Oxford and for the program. So I'm sorry I have notes, I'm nervous, and I've never done anything like this before. Basically, throughout my entire life and in recovery and sobriety, the one word that has circulated about me the most and what people use to describe me is passion and very passionate. And that can kind of be good and kind of be bad, but when I looked that up and looked at the definition, it is intense, impassioned, excited, heartfelt, animated, which I'm very animated, I'm very spirited, and I'm very loving. And I think I can use a lot of those skills or a lot of those adjectives to pour that into my what I love to do in my service work and move that into World Council. I want to be a very continued part of the movement, and I heard that word used in talking about World Council this morning, the word movement. I like that a lot. I like that term a lot. I want to be a part of that. I want to be part of the solution. I want to be part of a team that will help follow through with these resolutions. Some of those resolutions that I've come to understand that may be stuck as lack of a better word, possibly, that we may need to help push along. And those that are awaiting resolution. I want to be a part of that and a part of moving those along. I love Oxford. I love the model. I like what it stands for. And I think addicts and alcoholics are some of the most special people in the world. I hear that a lot in meetings. You know, we are special and we have a lot to offer and we have a lot of potential. And lastly, I helped start a program called Choice 180. It's a charity. And it was basically started to help fund those in jail who are incarcerated, and we just got through hearing a lot about that. And those folks coming out of jail, we were helping to fund those folks in the Norfolk and Virginia Beach area to get into Oxford programs. Unfortunately, it was a bigger task for just 1 or 2 people, such as myself, to undertake. So what I did with it is, it's still called Choice 180. But what I do with that is now I take donations from the umbrella, which is called CAN, and we take donations. And what I do with those donations, it's food, personal hygiene, and like deodorant, shaving kits for men, things like that, hair supply products for women. I take that and I donate that to the houses and things like that. So anyway, thanks so much and vote for me.
Next up, we have Michael Long from Oregon.
Stepping out of my comfort zone. Hello, family. Where's my Oregon family at? My name is Mike Long, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means to me is, by the grace of God and the 12 steps, I have not had a drug or a drink since January 20th of 2010. It's an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity to be running for World Council. At the end of a long and bad run, I was out of excuses and friends, and even lost visitation time with my 3 little girls. I was either going to die or go back behind bars. And after a week clean and sober, I moved into the Graham Oxford House. The guys there were a living example of the Oxford way.
they were getting involved. They were chapter officers. They were mentoring houses. They were giving to other houses. And they were working programs. And they encouraged me to get involved in service work. And I bought into that idea. Within 6 months, I was voted in as a HSC chair, then served as co-chair and chapter chair, and then we started a Reentry on our chapter. I got to do 2 terms on that as well. I am currently the Housing Services Chair for the Oregon State Association. And I've served on workshop committees and served on chapter fundraiser committees. We sent like over 20 people to world conventions and keep giving back. And I meet with my sponsor every Monday, attend 3 meetings a week. You know, and I want to serve on the World Council to be a part of finding solutions on the world level and work with the amazing and talented people that make the current council. I believe that if we want to keep what we have to give it away. And I believe that the interests of houses should always come first. Thank you. Vote my point.
Okay. And finally, we have Murphy Levine from Texas.
Hi, I'm Murphy, and I'm an addict. I don't have $500 for anybody, but I promise if you ask, Texas will help you. Currently, I am Chapter 2 Chair in Texas, and I serve as our state HSC for the female in the north. And yikes. Okay. There's so many people in here. I really have a passion in like helping people like find a place like to get into. They were talking about reentry, and there was a specific instance. I don't know if you read my cards, but on the back it talks about like I packed 2 guys in the back of my car, and like I drug them to my house meeting, and then I took them to an interview. Yeah, they had just gotten out of prison and they had nowhere to go. So yeah, and so you know, but that was done for me when I got into Oxford. And so, like, I had just come back from a relapse, and the co-chair of my chapter, like, came and picked me up at the train station. I've never met him in my life. And he's like, he just takes me he took me everywhere all day with him and showed me what Oxford was about, took me to house meetings, and showed me how their meetings went, and then took me to an interview, and I got into a house with no money and nothing, like, I had nothing to offer. And my parents didn't want to talk to me, and like, I had nothing. And they let me in, and they became my family. And then there was a whole chapter, you know, that 4 months later, I became secretary, and then I think 2 months after that, became co-chair, actually. I don't know, it's just been a really awesome opportunity, and I'm always looking for ways to give back. And so it would be really awesome if, yeah, I could give back to all of you. So if you're clean and serene, vote for Murphy Levine, and let me know. And let me know how I can be of service to you.
Okay. Okay, so don't forget, pick up the ballots at the World Council table directly across from the registration table. Have them turned in by noon tomorrow. We will announce the winners tomorrow afternoon. Thank you guys. Enjoy your night.